Dexter can be incredibly serious at times, but there are still plenty of funny moments throughout the show. Today, we are going to list the funniest moments we can think of, starting with one of the earliest laughs of the series, Dexter asking if Sergeant Dokes is Jewish. Dexter Season 1, Episode 1, Dexter. Sergeant Dokes never trusted Dexter. In fact, 16 minutes into the pilot episode, it is established that Dexter gives Dokes the creeps. Dokes approaches Dexter's desk and tells him as much. But the true gold comes after Dexter apologizes for unwittingly disturbing Dokes. Dokes says "fuck you" rather aggressively to Dexter in response to the insincere apology, and Dexter's face is nothing short of side-splitting. He offers an inarguably funny "okay" before asking the sergeant if there is anything he can help him with. Dokes demands that he draft a report on a case he's been working on before sarcastically asking Dexter, "You think I'm here to invite you to my nephew's bris?" Not missing a beat, Dexter responds with one of the funniest lines of the series, "I didn't know you were Jewish." Dokes is not amused, tells Dexter to shut the fuck up, and directs his report as needed.
"You think I'm here to invite you to my nephew's bris?"
"I didn't know you were Jewish."
"Shut the fuck up."
From the conclusion of Season 2, we know that Dokes would meet a brutal end, but he offered many hilarious tidbits during his brief time on the show. A fan favorite, James Dokes was complex, difficult, but lovable, and obviously a bit of a card when he wanted to be. After all, his titular line, "Surprise, motherfucker,"
"Surprise, motherfucker,"
became such a popular meme that some people use it without even knowing the origin. He can be effortlessly funny, and even when he isn't trying to, he can create unforgettable moments that leave us all wanting more. But he's not the only character that makes us laugh. Dexter tries to tear up. Dexter Season 1, Episode 5, Love American Style. One of Dexter's defining traits is his difficulty empathizing with other people's feelings, as well as an inability to feel certain emotions himself. On many occasions, people close to Dexter have tried to express complex emotions to him, but he rarely seems like he understands. The most Dexter can usually muster is some form of guilt or embarrassment over this social disconnect. And even though it may make some of us cringe, his attempts to fake his emotions can come out in some side-splitting ways. His connection with Rita, for example, appears to be one of convenience when it is first introduced.
"She's perfect because Rita is, in her own way, as damaged as me."
He appreciates the fact that she is damaged like he is, and finds it comfortable to be around someone as averse to emoting as he was. Rita didn't pressure Dexter to be different. She seemed to enjoy that he didn't want to move too quickly and genuinely preferred his detached attitude towards sex. But after one particularly hard day for her and a friend from work, she called him seeking emotional support, and he was able to fake it, but not completely. Dexter offers to rent a lighthearted movie for them to enjoy together to take her mind off of things, but he shows up with terms of endearment, a known tearjerker. As they sit on the couch together, Rita is sobbing watching the film, but Dexter is expressionless. Realizing how strange it is to show no emotion during moments like these, Dexter looks over at Rita and tries to contort his face into an expression more appropriate for the setting. His facial expressions are funny enough on their own, but when he thinks to himself,
"Maybe if I don't blink, my eyes will tear up,"
the levity of the scene fully sets in. It's also funny enough that he thought terms of endearment would be light and cheerful, but his desperation to mirror Rita's emotions sent it over the top. It was obviously somewhat upsetting to Dexter to be so void of emotion, but his inner monologue showing how he processes that made for some of the funniest moments in the series. Deb's description of babies. Dexter Season 3, Episode 3, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Deborah Morgan was a woman of many talents, one of which being her ability to phrase things like no one else could.
"I don't care about press conferences or public opinion. All I care about is catching the fucker that did this."
Deb had a bit of an edge to her personality, most likely because of long-standing abandonment issues. She has always wanted to be closer with her family, but it never seemed to pan out for her really. From a young age, she was vying for attention from her father and from Dexter, specifically following the passing of their mother Doris. Her attempts at connection were rarely successful, but Deborah never gave up hope that one day she might break down Dexter's walls. Until the season 6 finale, she had no way of knowing that her brother's distance stemmed from his need to keep his life as a serial killer separate from his relationship with her. So before then, she continued to try to get closer to Dexter and was visibly distraught when she wasn't able to pull it off. Dexter was also a well-practiced liar, thanks to his foster father Harry teaching him to be one. As a result, he found it easier and easier to lie to Deb. She had an innate willingness to believe him, so whereas she easily sniffed out most other people's lies, Dexter's she hardly even bothered to question. Occasionally though, Dexter had an actual truthful excuse that could help him maintain his natural distance from Deb without having to lie again. One of the most hilarious lines in the show came as a result of such a convenience. Deborah asks Dexter to meet up after work to discuss the high-profile Skinner case over a beer, but Dexter already has plans for the evening. He had recently killed a man named Freebo, someone the Miami Metro Homicide Department and the ADA of Miami, Miguel Prado, were also after due to his alleged involvement in the death of 2 young women amongst other crimes. Believing that Freebo had killed his younger brother, Oscar, Miguel tracked Freebo down the same night that Dexter did with the same intention. As a result, right after killing Freebo, Dexter was immediately found by Miguel, who had stumbled onto the scene. Miguel wanted Freebo dead himself, so when he learned that Dexter had already done the deed for him, Miguel was grateful and had no interest in turning Dexter in. On the contrary, he wanted to get closer with Dexter, and continued to invite him out to different events and even over to his home on several occasions. So before Deb could invite Dexter to talk shop and get a drink with her, Miguel had already made plans with Dexter and his soon-to-be bride Rita. But his increasingly close relationship with Miguel would seem strange and could lead to a lot of questions from Deb. Not only that, but Deb and Miguel had gotten off to a rough start after the investigation into Oscar's death began. So rather than tell her that he had plans with the powerful ADA, Dexter opted to tell her a half-truth. He couldn't come out because Rita was pregnant. He used that as his reasoning for being too preoccupied to meet that evening, and it worked like a charm. Deb was nothing short of shocked and ecstatic, leading to one of the funniest expressions uttered in the entire series. Dexter repeated himself and Deb exclaimed,
A baby? Motherfucking roly-poly, chubby cheek shit machine, are you kidding me?
Perhaps more surprising than the pregnancy news itself was Deb's unusual characterization of what a baby is. Deb has always had a way with words, profane or otherwise, but this phrasing really takes the cake. It's hard to imagine that someone really wrote such a hilarious line into such a serious show, but it landed perfectly. Dexter's dry cleaner's quip. Dexter Season 3, Episode 10, Go Your Own Way. Dexter had a way of taunting his victims that can only be described as salt in the wound. After realizing his friend Miguel Prado had been using him to get away with murder, Dexter knew that he had to put Miguel down for good. He met with Miguel to confront him about his killing of innocents and attempts to manipulate Dexter himself. They met on the roof of Miami Metro per Miguel's instructions, and there, Dexter's personality was displayed brilliantly. Miguel was the only person alive who knew Dexter had killed someone, Freebo, the man Miguel believed to be responsible for the death of his baby brother, Oscar. But Miguel had used evidence in that murder to manipulate Dexter into trusting him. Miguel made Dexter believe that he was being given the shirt he had on the night Freebo was killed. The shirt had Freebo's blood on it, and could tie Miguel to the murder if it were ever turned over to police. So by giving it to Dexter, Miguel made it seem like they had mutually assured destruction. He wouldn't turn Dexter in, and Dexter wouldn't turn him in. They could trust each other, right? Not exactly, because as Miguel's lust for killing grew, Dexter was inclined to test the blood on the shirt Miguel had given him all those weeks ago. It turned out it was bovine, or cow's blood on the shirt, not Freebo's at all. It was a dud. Miguel had most likely destroyed the real one and then recreated it to make Dexter believe that they were equally vulnerable. Upon discovering this, Dexter conned his way into Miguel's home and stole the trophy he kept from his murder of prosecutor Ellen Wolf. In its place, he left a note from the cleaners where he left the dud shirt for Miguel to pick up. "You think this is funny?" Miguel asked once they met, prompting Dexter to fire back with his sarcastic brand of humor.
Think this funny?
Not at all. They said that stain would come out.
Fuck you.
This earns him an expletive-laden rant from Miguel, who was not amused by his former friend's little quip. The audience surely was, though. This moment is one of the most discussed by fans as a hilarious scene in a series that is so often dark and intense. Dexter's flashback to Wiggles, Dexter New Blood, Episode 9, The Family Business. Dexter created a similarly hilarious moment while taunting a creepy child predator known as Wiggles the Clown. The flashback to this kill breaks the fourth wall a few times as Dexter tries to explain his process to both Harrison and the audience. He doesn't go as far as telling his son that he killed Wiggles, but Dexter outlined his motives and the code he used to select his victims, including Wiggles. He then went into detail about how he tracked Wiggles down when there were no witnesses in order to confront him and prevent him from hurting any more kids by scaring him. The funniest parts of the sequence come as Dexter fondly remembers his takedown of Wiggles and interacts directly with the camera on multiple occasions. He seems to be having more fun with his ritual than usual. He subdued the killer clown while wearing a clown nose himself, and then playfully knocked the bright red nose off of his face while smiling directly into the camera. The true kick of the scene comes when he wakes Wiggles back up. As usual, the killer feigns innocence, claiming not to know what was going on. Dexter breaks the fourth wall again, looking at the camera with a sly grin and saying,
They always say some shit like that.
almost every time Dexter has someone on his table, they start off pretending to be completely innocent. What's funny is the flippant attitude Dexter has developed towards this pattern. He all but rolled his eyes and then demanded that Wiggles stop clowning around. Finally, Dexter showed Wiggles the photos of his young victims and then finished him off for good. Again, Dexter does spare Harrison from the fact that he killed the clown, or anyone else, which makes the moment seem less intense than other kill scenes in the series. Mocking Speltzer, Season 7, Episode 4, Run. When Dexter takes down the demented woman killer Ray Speltzer, we get another glimpse at his humorous side. Speltzer was a sick man who trapped women in a horrifying maze he'd constructed himself. He chased them through the dark maze, knowing they wouldn't be able to find their way out, and beat them to death before taking one of their earrings as a trophy. Dexter and Deb were both interested in taking Speltzer down, but he managed to slip through the cracks of the justice system time and time again. Deb knew by that point that Dexter was a serial killer, but she did not approve and really wanted him to quit. Dexter knew he couldn't do that, and instead sought to get Deborah on board with the idea of him taking out Speltzer. Initially, she is entirely against it, wanting to bring him in legally. But after Speltzer killed one more woman on Deb's watch, she accepted that Dexter had to do his thing and take the killer out permanently to save innocent lives. Dexter, of course, successfully tracks Speltzer down in due time and gets him strapped to his table, just as he had so many murderers before him. When Speltzer comes to, he is understandably startled by his predicament and begins screaming and jerking around beneath his restraints. Dexter watches from a nearby platform, but hops down and rushes over to mock Speltzer to his face as he lay on the table screaming and thrashing about powerless.
Feels good.
Fans love this scene because Dexter is again having fun with his ritual and also making fun of a man who truly deserved it. It was like watching a bully get bullied, but funnier because it's Dexter doing the mockery, jumping around and showing more emotion than he usually ever does. Also, it shows the futility of all of Speltzer's rage. He had reached the end of the road, and all the brute force and intimidation in the world couldn't save him from Dexter. The elimination of Speltzer was very satisfying given what he'd been doing to innocent women. And it wouldn't be the first time Dexter went out of his way to personally offend one of his victims to be. Not the Clapton. Dexter Original Sin, Episode 4, Fender Bender. In fact, Dexter's desire to antagonize his targets came up constantly, and it often manifested in very funny ways. For instance, in Episode 4 of the prequel series, Dexter Original Sin, Dexter had his sights set on a man named Anthony Mad Dog Moretti. Mad Dog was a retired hitman for the mob with a reputation of having completed as many as 200 kills while he was active. After a bit of investigation, Dexter found out that Mad Dog wasn't retired after all. Dexter dug into the killer's background and discovered new evidence that linked him to a man who had not been killed yet. First, Dexter met up with Mad Dog under the guise of being a potential customer looking to charter the killer's boat. Later, Dexter broke into Mad Dog's home and found a shredded photograph of a man named Omar Reyes, confirming that Mad Dog was likely still active as a killer and planning to murder again soon. During the boat trip, Dexter subtly interrogated Mad Dog about his past, but Mad Dog is cagey and suspicious, so the conversation didn't go very far. But the fact that Mad Dog had information on Reyes indicated that he was not his latest victim, but was slated to be his next. Dexter struggled to get Harry's approval to target Mad Dog. After all, Mad Dog was a seasoned killer and Dexter had just started out. But with a bit of convincing, Harry recognized the need to save the next potential victim from Mad Dog. He caved and agreed not to get in Dexter's way, but begged him to be careful. However, it seemed that Dexter had other plans. Dexter snuck up on Mad Dog at his house and took the time to set up a kill room there after he had his target subdued. He ambushed Mad Dog, recklessly knocking him out with one of the many expensive guitars the killer had collected. However, Mad Dog regained consciousness as Dexter was setting up and attacked before he could be fully tied down. The two killers ended up tangled in a violent struggle as Dexter attempted to get Mad Dog unconscious and back on his table. During that struggle is when Dexter took the time to add insult to injury in hysterical fashion. He raised one of Mad Dog's prized guitars over his head, preparing to hit him with it as he'd done earlier, but hilariously Mad Dog yelled out,
"No, not the Clapton!"
It was as if he wanted to preserve his guitar as much as he wanted to preserve his own life. Dexter stopped for one moment and glanced at the instrument in his hand before smashing it in a rage right in front of a distraught Mad Dog. Mad Dog managed to headbutt Dexter and escape the house, which left him running down the street in his underwear. This is also a funny sight to see, but it ends in the blink of an eye when Mad Dog is hit by an oncoming truck and killed instantly. Though he was only in the show for one episode, Mad Dog's brash personality and confusing priorities made for quite a funny and engaging addition to the show. Dexter's dance moves. Dexter Season 6, Episode 1, Those Kinds of Things. And that brings me to the question, who says serial killers can't be multifaceted? Dexter is often seen as brooding, aloof, and detached, but when it comes to completing his kill ritual, he can fake almost anything. As Season 6 opens, Dexter has his sights set on an old classmate of his, Joe Walker. Dexter believed Joe killed his own wife and got away with it years ago. He plans to attend a high school reunion just to get his knife into Joe, who he saw only as a bully and a killer. Deb is surprised that Dexter is interested in attending a high school reunion, commenting that Dexter is the only person she knows who hated high school more than she did. But she didn't investigate too deeply, and Dexter was able to go to the reunion without raising any more alarm bells. Once there, it turned out that many people actually remembered him. They offered their condolences, having become familiar with the story of Rita's death from the news. Dexter almost seemed popular as everyone was interested in his experience working with Miami Metro Homicide, given all of the high-profile cases they'd investigated in recent years. Dexter is initially overwhelmed by the attention. He'd become used to being under the radar and doing his deeds while bringing as little attention to himself as possible. And though he wasn't expecting everyone to flock to him as they did, he eventually leans into it and allows himself to enjoy his newfound popularity. He even managed to hook up with a former classmate who had been highly sought after when they were in school together. None of that distracts him from his intended purpose, however. He still plans on killing Joe, he just isn't sure how he will make it happen after a long night of schmoozing and gathering very little intel on his intended target. Part of that schmoozing involved one of the funniest scenes of the series. After he failed to get a sample of Joe's blood to confirm his guilt, Dexter needed to blend into the scene of the reunion. What's more is, he almost wanted to, thinking that was what his father would have wanted for him. As a result, we get to see something incredibly rare from Dexter. The music picks up and he is dragged onto the dance floor by a few of his drunken classmates. There, Dexter does his own version of busting a move to the song You Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. His awkward dance moves and the faces he makes really make for a good laugh. Dexter doesn't know what hammer time is, but he seems to be able to catch enough of the rhythm to match the energy his former classmates were bringing to the floor as they danced in sync with one another. He did an incredibly hilarious turn as he looked over and imagined his father Harry giving him a thumbs up for enjoying himself and blending in. It's not often that Dexter is shown happily participating in social events, and even less often to see him dancing. That makes this rare moment even more hysterical. Watching him awkwardly bop around on the dance floor with his old peers while trying his best to have fun is probably the most hilarious visual this series has to offer. Masuka's Metaphor, Dexter Season 3, Episode 5, Turning Beminese. A prime example of this is the moment that Masuka stood up to Ramon Prado, which became an instant classic. The unhinged older brother of Miguel Prado, Ramon, was incensed by the death of his youngest brother, Oscar. He was hellbent on solving the case and bringing someone to justice for his baby brother's death. He consistently overstepped the bounds of his role as a lieutenant and as a victim in his pursuit. Eventually, he would drunkenly attack Dexter in a public space in front of several police officers, resulting in a suspension. But before that, he continued to berate the crew at Miami Metro and go over their heads to get to the bottom of his brother's murder sooner than he thought they'd be able to. In one of these instances, Ramon had evidence processed at a lab outside of Miami Metro. He then showed up triumphantly one day, trying to use the analysis of that evidence to guide the investigation in the way he saw fit. Naturally, the detectives of the homicide department were offended by this show of arrogance and pushed back. Ramon wanted to connect a separate homicide to Miami Metro's investigation into Freebo and the Skinner. This would intertwine the two precincts and allow Ramon to be a lead on his own brother's case. For some reason, he did not trust Miami Metro to solve the case on their own, at least not in a timely fashion, and that spurred his desire to be personally involved in bringing the perp to justice. Still, it was in poor form and out of his jurisdiction. He continually antagonized everyone at Miami Metro and insulted their abilities, but it was Vince Masuka's own forensic analysis that shut Ramon's plan down. When Ramon arrived with his inaccurate forensic analysis, Masuka stood up to him and pointed out the facts of the situation. Masuka's analysis had identified cotton fibers in the airways of Ramon's allegedly related victim. The Skinner case was centered on an unknown killer who partially skinned people while they were alive and then strangled them to death. Ramon's victim had been smothered, not strangled, and they had been skinned posthumously. This indicated two completely different MOs, which suggested two separate killers. The cases were not connected in any way. This meant that there was no way that Ramon could come in and micromanage the investigation into his brother's death as he'd hoped. In one last desperate attempt to connect his victim to Miami Metro's case, Ramon says that Masuka's analysis was just his opinion. Masuka calmly shut him down like only he could, and provided us with an unforgettably hilarious line in the process saying, "That's not opinion, that's science."
And science is one cold-hearted bitch with a 14-inch strap-on.
It was a wrap after that. Ramon had to accept defeat and leave the detectives to conduct their investigation as they saw fit without his influence. Masuka was well known for offering hilarious one-liners throughout the series, but this line is just a one-of-a-kind gem that you wouldn't catch in any other show.